Hey, how you doing? It's Coach Beasley again. I want to make this separate video here for my online people to go over some basic things within the Photoshop program. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. I'm just going to talk about things like the layout of the program, what you first see when you get into the program, and how to kind of do your own little setup or layout of what you want. So the first thing that comes up, we're looking at Photoshop now. Hopefully you can see the whole screen. It may be cut off along the edges, but you'll get the gist and the idea. When you first open up Photoshop, you're going to get a screen that looks like this. You'll have this navigation here on the left-hand side. There'll be these three different sections here. Let's talk about these three sections. The first part at the top, right underneath where it gives you the welcome there, if there's any new updates or new features that exist in the version of Photoshop that you have, this section here will give you the ability to kind of see what those things are. You'll click on that button and you'll either get a message a little message window that'll pop in that'll show you what those things are. This looks like it's going to try to go through one of those. I didn't want to do this. Hopefully I can stop this. What's happening right now is the second thing that I wanted to show you, which is the learn section. The learn section goes over showing you and showcasing you through a video and some directions on how to do a particular feature within Photoshop. The problem, a lot of times, one of the problems that come about with this, and give me 1 second, let me change my share screen. One of the problems that come about with doing this learn process is that you can't get out of it once you get in it, meaning that you sometimes have to complete going through the whole thing, whatever it is, whatever the tutorial is, before you can get out. At least that's how it used to be. Let me see if I can close this Discover window and close this untitled file that I don't need to look at. No, I don't need to save it. Oh, cool. Now I get back. All right. So I was able to get out of there and get back. This is what I wanted you to see when I clicked on that learn more. This pops up if there's new features that's popped in for the new updates or whatever like that may have happened. You'll probably also see down at the bottom, there'll be, little messages that'll show up at the bottom in a bar, like this little blue bar down here at the bottom as well. So if you need that, you'll see those things pop in. You can see what those particular features are, and there'll be a learn more or try it now. And again, be careful with clicking on that because it will take you into something that you should be able to get out of, but then again, you may not be able to. Learn. This is the second section that's up here at the top. When I click on go to learn, it should see how it's doing. It's just popping in again with that discover. It's taking me to different tutorials that are available for me to self-pace or walk my way through them. But again, if I click on anything here, it's going to start and I usually can't stop it. So I'm trying to not do that piece and get out of this. If you happen to get out of that start screen and you want to go back to it, because you don't want to do anything in Photoshop, you want to go back to the start screen. Up at the very top, all the way to the left, there's a button that looks like a little house. When you click on the house, it takes you back to the start screen. So if you need to do that, you have that there. Now, the bottom section here is your recent files. So anything that you were recently working on, and yeah, most of my stuff is tame this time. We'll show you the last few things that you've been working on, whether it's a cloud file or whether it's one of the files on your computer that you've been working off of. So you'll see that. So all that is encased in the home section, all right, in the navigation. The learn section will take you to just a display of those things that was in that discover panel. Just show it to you in a little bit of a little more organized way. And notice it says open in app underneath each one of these. So it just opens up in the application and you'll go through that particular tutorial. Now, your files is a list of your files you have on your cloud account. So any file that you save to the cloud, the PSDC files, any of those that you saved on the cloud will be showing to you here under your files. So you can see them. You could select them. Like if you hover over one, there's a little checkbox that you can click on to. And then above that section, you can delete the file or duplicate it or, make it online, make it available on offline all the time, anything like that if you want to. or you can delete it and get rid of it if you don't need it. There is a deleted section or deleted folder for anything that you may have accidentally deleted under your files. You can get it back within 30 days. You got 30 days to get it out of the trash can, or it's gone. Shared with you. If you're collaborating and working with a group of people at a company, with a team, a lot of times that company will pay for the team version of the Creative Cloud, where everybody's sharing one cloud location. So you'll have your individual one, but then you'll have a cloud location where you can dump things into. Everybody will have access to it. So that'll show up here under this shared section for Photoshop, for Illustrator, and it's going to be for InDesign too. Also, people can take a file themselves that they have in their cloud account, and they can share it with you. All they got to do is know what your email address is. You know, the email address that you're logged into with your cloud account. If they know that email address, they can put in that email address and then send you an email with a link to that file. And that link, when you find it in your email, you click on the link, it'll pop open Photoshop and show up under here under the shared with you if it's a Photoshop file. If it's an Illustrator file, it'll go to Illustrator and so forth and so on. Lightroom, if you're not familiar with Lightroom is another application. It's actually two that in the Adobe family. Lightroom is a stripped down version of Photoshop. Anyone who's a photographer, you'll probably like Lightroom a little bit better because it's not as heavy, meaning it doesn't have so many different toys and tools in it. It's straightforward. You take pictures on your camera, you connect your camera or connect the memory card to the computer. The computer will upload the pictures into Lightroom. Now, from there, you can manage the photos, put your metadata and information on there. You can also do some simple color correction or photo retouching while you're there inside of Lightroom. So that's what it's for. It's for the simple editing, nothing real heavy-handed, not a lot of photo retouching stuff. Just, you know, fix a red eye, take a blemish away, remove some trash out of the background. Simple, easy stuff. And then the heavier things, you rely on Photoshop. So that's why this link is here, because once you put the files into Lightroom, you can, from Photoshop, get to those files and open them up here in Photoshop to do something more substantial to the image. Add it as a collage of pictures, cut, copy, paste stuff, whatever else that you need to do, filter things, whatever, stuff like that. So that's what that's for. So that's what you get in the first, splash screen here of Photoshop. Now, if you want to make a new document, we went over that. So new file, you would open up this dialog box here that lets you create a new document. You'll see this. It'll look similar in your other Adobe programs because they try to make everything look the same. You will have some presets. So across the top here, there will be these different preset options. So you'll have blank documents that you can create of these presets. You'll also have some templates that you can get that comes from Adobe stock. So down here at the very bottom of this interface, there's a search that you could type in something you're looking for and have it go to Adobe Stock's website, and you can find those things. Adobe Stock is not free. I'll say that again. Adobe Stock is not free. It does not come with your Creative Cloud account. That is a separate thing. But templates, most templates are free. So the ones that are listed here, they're free for you to get. If you go find another template from Adobe Stock, just check to see if it's free. It'll be tagged as being free. If it's something you got to pay for, you got to pay for it before you can use it. They used to give you, and I think they still have this when it comes to photos and other assets, photos, sound files, illustrations, some video clips. They will let you get 10 of those per month for free, but they're all going to be watermark tagged, which means they'll be tagged with an Adobe watermark over it that you can't get rid of until you pay for it. So for projects where you're just trying out things before you actually, decide to buy it, you could try out the picture, you could try out the video excerpt or anything like that, see if it works for what you need to do. And if it does, go to Adobe Stock's website, pay for that one thing, and then the watermark goes away. And then you can use it, spindle, mutilate, destroy, do whatever you want to with it at that point. Because now it technically, quote unquote, belongs to you. It doesn't really belong to you. You just have the license in which to use that. Again, that's another thing we'll talk about in lecture 11. Now, over here on the side, these preset details. So under these preset details is where you could put in your own information, or if you pick one of the presets, it's already kind of pre-filled out, but you can modify it and add on your own deal. So first is going to be the name. The name of the file is untitled 1 or 2 or 3 or however many you made for that day. If you want to change this name, you can easily change the name to whatever you need, and that will be the name of the file when you end up saving it. And you can change the name again if you need to, but that's just the beginning. Uh, Width and height. You do not set the width and height yet. You wait, and the first thing you want to do is you want to set your unit measurement. So you want to see, you want to find out in the plan how big, small, and what unit measurements is this thing supposed to be in, so that way you could put it in the proper unit measurement first before you get started. So for instance, I want to do a t-shirt design. So I talked to my screen printer. I asked him how big of a screen he could print for these t-shirts. He tells me the maximum size is 12 inches by 12 inches, but the maximum size, because the whole screen is that big, but you got to have some space on the sides. So he tells me that it's really 11 and a half, on the width and 11 and a half on the height. So I can fudge that around by a quarter of an inch. So if I do 11.25 inches for the width, and then for the height, I put in 11.25 for the height. That's the maximum space that I have from my screen printer to be able to print on, which means I need to make sure my design is that size and that size only. Does that make sense? I hope it does. There's an orientation, which really doesn't make any difference here because it's just a square image for portrait and landscape. That really doesn't really factor anything in here. Artboards. Long drawn out episode of this. If you're taking the vector class with Coach Strength, he's going to talk about artboards, basically the space that you work on, the page that you work on within the program. In Photoshop, it's called a canvas. In InDesign and Illustrator, it's called an artboard. So for artboards, you can create multiple pages, meaning I can have multiple artboards in an Illustrator file. That could be the logo that I create there in Illustrator, plus the social media banners, plus the logo stationery, plus the envelope size, plus. I can have as many pages as I want in one Illustrator file, and I can print them all out. I can export them all out for digital. I can do it all in this one file. Everything's great. Photoshop, you don't have that. In Photoshop, you have one canvas. That canvas is whatever size you set for that width and height. This artboard thing here, somebody got the wild hair up their butt to say that, hey, I want to have artboards like I have in Illustrator and InDesign. Can I do that? Adobe's good for doing this. Yeah, sure. We'll try to make it happen. May not be successful, but we'll try. And this is what they did. They put in this little artboard feature that if this is checked on, you would have the ability to take the one canvas and divide that one canvas into different sections of that canvas and state that this is one artboard, this is another, this is another, this is another. While that works on screen and it's fine, as far as outputting things, you can't print it that way because that won't work. And your export out for the individual artboards as separate files for digital doesn't work either. It doesn't work well. Might be my opinion, but I always tell people that I'm teaching, talking to, don't use the artboards. Uncheck it because it's just not refined like it wants to be. Like the intention of it is not there. Until you can make multiple artboards inside of one Photoshop file, this artboard thing is not going to fly. All right, resolution. We talked about what the resolution is. Talking again with our scenario with the print shop. I asked him what does the resolution of the images need to be. He's going to tell me, well, it's got to be at least 225, but if you put it at 300, that'll work too. So I'll just go with the 300 number because that way, generally 300 is kind of like the generic. Hey, put it at that number for the resolution, and you won't go wrong for most things that you print. Like I said, anything larger than a billboard or larger than a movie poster, then you probably have to go with a larger number than 300. But anything between 150 and 300 is usually acceptable, but you got to clear it with whoever is printing it to find out because they would be the ones that know. Background color, the background content. So this is the first layer that you'll get in this new document. What do you want that color of that layer to be? Do you want it to be white, which represents white paper that you're putting everything on? It could be black. It could be transparent, because some people that work on strictly web-based things or strictly digital on-screen things, they don't want that white background. They want that gray and white checkerboard pattern that you would see that indicates transparent space. They'd rather that. And so you could choose transparent. Me, I'd rather choose white. My background, I'm an older guy, so I started using Photoshop way, way back in the day. So that's when all we had was the white background. So we put our pictures and everything on top of this white background. You had to make another layer if you wanted some other color, and we just lived with that and just worked that way. So I still work that way. That's how it triggers in my mind. If you want to change the color, anytime you see this square right here, this white square that sits next to the background contents, anytime you see a square like that in Photoshop, click on it. It opens up this thing, which is called your color picker. Your color picker, about 90% of the time that you're working in Photoshop, you're going to get to this color picker to be able to pick and choose the color you want to use. Other programs will have this color picker or something that looks similar to it. It just depends on if you're going to use it or not in those other programs. But Photoshop, you're definitely going to use it. Now, if you're just experimenting and trying to figure out what color you want to use, out of those 16 million colors that we talked about before in RGB, this little slider right here will go to each one of those different areas of color, those ranges of color. And then the big box is where you click to put this little circle to actually choose the color within that range that you want. When you pick that color, HSB, RGB, CMYK, lab, and this little pound sign down here. These are the different color modes that are available for you to numerically put in the color. So if somebody gives you the numbers for the color, remember I told you before, somebody wants orange, what color is that? You know, give me the numbers for it. Well, it's 38, 36, 22. Is that RGB? Yeah. Which one's the red? Which one's the green? Which one's the blue? Be a jerk. I'm a person that's a jerk. I will actually do that to somebody. They will be annoyed at first until they realize that I'm trying to get these numbers right and writing them down. Writing the numbers down and getting it right will let you put them into something like this. You put in those numbers in the RGB and you won't be wrong because somebody gave you the numbers. And if the numbers are wrong, it's their fault, not yours. Make sure you be aware of that and you're secure with that. So 22, 38, and 74 for red, for green, for blue. That gives me some type of blue color. Why? There's more blue than the green or the red value between those 0 to 255. So that's why it ended up being that color. That's how it kind of works with the numbers. HSB is another popular color mode. H stands for hue, S is for saturation, B is for brightness. Then you got CMYK here, and then you got the one that for digital people and people that work with writing code and that sort of thing, it's called the hexadecimal number. It's 6 alphanumeric characters that represent that color. That's another number to write down. It's good to use that number to communicate with people nowadays. I'd be like, hey, what's this color blue that I got? Here's the hexadecimal number, or here's the hex number for it. And you can rattle off those 6 digits, and it's just easier for them to write it down instead of 3 separate numbers or 4 separate numbers and stuff like that. So that's always a good thing to do. We'll talk about this color picker a little bit more in depth when we get to the color theory class, because we'll be creating some colors. But anytime you need to create a color or select a color, you're going to go through it that way, through that color picker. All right, last 2 things. Under advanced options here, you have a color profile. We'll be setting this up in the 3rd lecture for setting up a color profile for your program. So the color profile is basically you telling the computer, this is the monitor that I'm using. And from that monitor that I'm using, this is how I want to have everything displayed based on the limitations of that monitor when something is in RGB. If something's in CMYK, this is the printer that I'm using, and I want everything to display to me on screen based on the limitations of this printer in CMYK ink. So that way you get a better representation on screen. Now, the great part about that is you're going to get your colors pretty much set in place. And a lot of times when you're color correcting or photo retouching, things are going to be a lot more accurate, based on your output of what you've got. Here comes the downside. If you're working with a team of people, you want to make sure everybody's working with the same color profile and no one's doing something different. So that way nothing gets messed up. Because for instance, everybody got a laptop, but not everybody's using the same laptop. So if everybody was working on the same laptop, it probably wouldn't be too much of an issue. But if everybody's working on a laptop, some people connect computer screens to the laptops, some people work on desktop computers, some people got old ones, some people got new ones, some people work off their phone. So if you're all working with the same type of output for the color profile, everything will generally look the same. If you're working in video, you got to go to the video editor and you got to ask them before you make this new document, what's the aspect ratio? They'll know what that means. And they'll tell you what the aspect ratio is. They'll tell it to you, and you just ask them if they rattle off a bunch of numbers to you. Just tell them, hey, is anamorphic? Is it DVD, PAL? Is it what is it? They'll tell you. And those who have experience with Photoshop will know that to tell you which one to use, because what happens is this: in video, pixels are not square. So instead of them being square, sometimes they're rectangular, sometimes they're hexagon shaped, sometimes they're rectangle shaped, sometimes they're not circles ever. But there's some other shape to be able to fit more pixels in the same space. So because of that, if you don't use the right aspect ratio, your pictures could get stretched or squished and look bad. Those in Mr. Thomas's filmmaking classes, ask him about Sergio Leone or Kung Fu films and how they do at the beginning of those films or at the end during the credits. They sometimes stretch the film, the footage. For some reason, they stretch it to make it look weird and stretched out. It's a stylistic thing, but that can happen to your images, not to that extreme, but it can happen to your images that you give to somebody in a video editor, and you don't change the aspect ratio. So just make sure you get that done before you make the new document and before you create it. So you go through this process, creating the new document with your specs. Once you got your specs in there, you hit the create button and Photoshop will open up for you with everything in place. That doesn't need to be there. Hold on one second. Stuff got kicked over. Okay. Photoshop, the layout of the program. My layout is going to obviously look different than yours. Out of the gate or out of the box, if you go to your window menu and under your window menu in Photoshop, you go down to Workspace, which is usually the second one down, and you pick Essentials. That's the default layout for everything Photoshop here. And you may have to go back to Window, Workspace, and Reset Essentials a little further down in order to reset everything to its default setup and layout that you would get just getting the program, just installing it brand new on a computer. It would look like this now. Over on the left-hand side, you're going to have your toolbox. Over on the right-hand side, you're going to have panels or palettes, depending on who you talk to. Across the top, you're going to have this options bar across the top where you have different options based on the tool that you pick. So you have tool options. At the bottom, there is what is called a status bar at the bottom of the screen. It gives you some type of status information about the document or about what you're working on here in Photoshop. There is no set way to set this up. Everybody's going to have their own way, their own style to it. And so there's nothing that is set in stone. One more panel that they now have is this context sensitive taskbar. Essentially, it's going to be floating either at the bottom underneath your underneath your canvas, or mine. I usually have mine floating off to the side, to one side or the other, just to kind of get it out the way. Usually I put it on my left-hand side of my screen once I get everything laid out the way I want. All of these things can be moved around and changed to whatever you feel like. So starting with the toolbar. Over on the toolbar, up in the top left-hand corner, there's a little button. It's hard to see, but it's a little double arrowhead button that if you click on it, it will pop the tools out to a double column instead of a single column. If you got enough space on your computer, like you're not working on a very small laptop, you're working on, a 15-inch or larger laptop screen, you could probably go to the double column and be able to see these tools, kind of how Photoshop was originally made. I like it that way. Again, I'm an older person, so my eyesight ain't the best, but I just don't like the whole single column deal. I just never liked it. Couldn't find tools that way. So I always liked it with the two columns because I could find the tools easier. Another thing that they've been doing is reducing the tools that you initially see. So all the way towards the bottom of the toolbar, there is a button that looks like three dots. When you click onto that button, no, not click. When you right click onto that button, you will see Edit Toolbar. When you click on Edit Toolbar, it will open up this entire block or box of information here. This is all the tools that should be in that toolbar. So what will happen, sometimes you'll get just the core tools and not the regular default set. And I'm trying to see, there was a way to kind of pull this in and I forgot what it was, but never mind. So where it says extra tools, if I hit this clear tools button here, it clears out all the tools in a toolbox. As you can see over here on my left, none of the tools are there anymore. And then what I'd be able to do is, I think it's either a drag and, yeah, it's a drag and drop. You could drag and drop tools over to customize the toolbar to whatever you want to see. So if there's tools that you don't ever use over time and you realize, oh, I don't ever use this tool, you can drag it over to the extra tools section and kind of remove it from the toolbox. Or you could drag all the tools over because you're not familiar with this. So for me, I always do the restore defaults from the beginning when I'm teaching class, just so everybody can see that all these tools are available and make sure that you know that all these tools are here. So you may have to hit this restore defaults like once or twice in order to get all the tools to show up, but it's a good idea to do that from the beginning. And then over time, when you realize that there's some tools you don't need, come back into this dialog box and just throw them over to the right-hand side from what's on the left to the right. And you can also rearrange the order of these tools. You'll notice that they're in a little bit of a grouping list. All the tools have a letter that correspond with activating that tool. Some of these tools are using the same letter. So if you hold down the Shift key and hit that letter as a keyboard shortcut, you would cycle through those different tools. So they're grouped together to represent different types of tool groups. If you want, you can go through these and kind of see how they work themselves out. Let me get out of this dialog box by hitting done. And with these different tools in their groups, if you right click on one of these tool buttons, you'll see the different groups when you right click and onto a tool button group that's here. You could tell if there's a group of tools because there's this little bitty mark in the lower right hand corner of the tool button itself. With these tools, Adobe has made a lot of work to make sure these tools look the same from one program to another. So if there's a tool that looks the same as another tool in a different program within the Adobe family, it does the same thing. For instance, the letter T right here is the type tool. It allows you to create text. So if you pick that tool, it allows you to, create text and create a text box and that sort of thing. You go to Illustrator and InDesign, it's always the letter T. This lasso here is a rope lasso. It's the lasso tool. So if you go to another program and you see that rope lasso, it's the lasso tool. It always does the same thing. Now, all these tools will have some type of tooltip that'll pop up if you hover over it for a second. So that way you can see what the tools are. Those of you on laptops, it is a great idea for you to get a mouse. Do not use the trackpad while you're using Photoshop because a lot of times the right clicking or using the keyboard shortcut with the mouse click does not work. So you have to use a mouse. So get a wireless mouse or a wired mouse, connect to your laptop and use that for the purpose of using your mouse or your pointing device. If you don't want to use a mouse, if you got like an Apple Pencil and an iPad, if you got a graphic tablet like a Wacom tablet, there's a bunch of different other ones that are out there, Huawei and Huion and some other ones that instead of a mouse to draw and paint with and do your work in Photoshop and Illustrator with, you have a tablet that you can draw and paint on, and it's very cool. They cost a range of dollars. So I'm not going to tell you to go buy one because you don't need it. But if you want to try one out, feel free to try it out. It's actually kind of fun to use it if you want to. Now, you have your different tools. We're not going to go over every last tool because that is a waste of time. We'll talk about the tools when we use them in class. The other tools you can discover on your own because, like I said, with these tool tips, they got little videos that go along with it that'll show you what the tool does. Below the tools, you have your two color squares. Again, clicking on one of those squares will open up your color picker for you to be able to pick and choose the color you want to use at that particular time with that tool. Depending on the tool, depends on if you need to pick a color. These two squares are called the foreground color and the background color square. They have nothing to do with the foreground and background of your picture anymore. They're just two colors that you could pick depending on what you're doing. You could pick one of those two colors as you go along pretty easily, pretty quick without having to jump over to the panels on the other side. Rules. Anytime that you choose a tool, all right, you need to get in the habit of doing a simple thing, and you just got to get used to doing it. You pick the tool, you set up your options, and then you use the tool. Here's a for instance. I want to pick this lasso tool. Before I use this lasso tool, I want to set my options. In the options bar, you have different options up here in the options bar to modify that tool to do the thing you want it to do. So you got to set those particular options, check to see if they're what do they want you want them to be, change them if you need to change them. Also, some of the tools require you some other options within the toolbox, like setting the color, and some of them require you to come over here to the panels over there on the right-hand side to set some options over there if you need to. Once you you select the tool, then you set the options. Options bar, panels, color, whatever the options are, then you can use the tool. So now I can actually use the tool for what I need to use it for. And your selection tool, this is a lasso tool that makes a selection. We'll talk about that in another class. This one's harmless for the most part, so you can doodle around with this, and it doesn't do anything permanent just yet. It's whatever you do after that that can become permanent. But you select the tool, set the options, use the tool. Select the tool, set the options, use the tool. Make sure you put that into your brain. So that way it becomes your habit and becomes muscle memory. Now that's it for the toolbar. Let's talk about these panels. Over with the panels, you have two versions of the same types of panels. You have tabs with the panels, so they display as little folder tabs like my color and swatches, and these other ones here, they'll stack on top of each other and be grouped together with these different folder tabs, right? Then you have what are buttons. So you have another column like right next to the color panel here. There's this button, two buttons here. One says for comments, and the other one is for history. They show up in these little bitty buttons here. Now, these different columns of panels can be arranged, can be adjusted for however you want to display them. And you can arrange all these panels that are inside of here however you want to. So for the ones that are in button mode, all right, there's a little dividing line between each one of these sections of these panels. And if you move your cursor to the right spot, it'll turn to this double-headed arrow, and then you can expand the panel out to be a little bit wider than it was. So when the button mode panels, you can see labels next to the buttons if you expand it out, or you can collapse it down where you just see the button. Starting off, if you go into button mode, I suggest you expand it out so you see the labels next to the button, so you know what the button is by sight without trying to figure it out. Later on, you can collapse it down to get it out your way. You can go back and forth between the button and the tab mode by clicking onto that double-headed arrow up at the top right-hand corner of the toolbox. So that way you can go from button mode to tab mode as you want to. And you can do it with any column of panels, so I can collapse this down to a bunch of buttons too to save me space as I feel I need to. When you're in the tab mode, it's going to be easier to arrange these panels into their own groups as you need to. So for instance, layers panel, which is all the way down here, I can pull this out here into this empty space, and now this becomes its own little floating box. Right now, it'll sit there forever until I close it or move it. So the next time I go into Photoshop, it'll sit right there. If I close it, I can hit the X right here to close that panel. Once I close it, it's not deleted, it's just closed for now. I can go to my window menu, which is a list of all the panels. Any panel that's not checked, any panel that's not checked means that panel is not open. So my layers panel, which I closed, doesn't have a checkbox. So if I click on layers there, boom, it pops open wherever I closed it. Okay. So if you ever need a panel, go to your window menu in any of these Adobe programs, find the panel you need, click on its name, it pops open wherever it was closed at or wherever it happens to sit. Once you got the panel open, like I mentioned before with rearranging things, I could take this panel and group it with others. So if I drag this panel by its name, so if I grab the panel by its little tab, I can drag it on top of another panel group, and I'll get this little blue box going around the whole entire group right there in that whole column, let me know that when I let go of my mouse, I'll dock it with those other panels. If I pull it next to one of these panels and to a particular spot, I'm going to see a single line going up and down vertically. That means I can dock it next to, create a whole new column. Don't create too many columns because you're going to reduce the space of your work area. But I can arrange and rearrange these panels however I feel like it. Let me show you some things that I do just because. Properties, layers, library. A lot of times what I do is I'll arrange these panels to be together in a group. Why? Because I want to. And I kind of like them grouped together. The adjustments panel, I have it separate from the layers panel. So I'll put that in another column. The layers panel, I can dock that whole entire panel. How I was moving the other ones, I can dock it like its own column, or group it with some others. This group of columns that I had over here all the way to the right, I can collapse those down into buttons. I know what those look like by their name, without having to look at their name, so I can collapse that down. And then this adjustments, where this adjustments panel is now, I can collapse that down into buttons because I don't need to see all of that. I can just collapse that down as I need to. That way I'm just looking at the layers panel expanded out, and I can open that up a little bit more, say like this. I like working with my side like this. Now, why? I did it a long time ago. I like it, and I want to keep it that way. Now, keeping it that way, you can go up here to your window menu, go to Workspace, and there's a command for creating a new workspace. New workspace means I'm taking the layout of my toolbox, my panels, all the tools that I selected that I wanted to see and not see, and I'm just saving it, holding on to it. So this way, you see how MDB and Core Tools is up here at the top? MDB is my initials, so I just use that automatically, and that becomes my layout that I want. So if I save my workspace, then I can come back here at any point in time and I can select that workspace by just clicking on the name up there. And if necessary, I can go back to Window, go back to Workspace, and click on Reset MDB. So that way it goes back to the way it initially was, the initial layout that I like from the beginning. And I can get things to sit and be where I need them to be, like this context taskbar. If I'm going to keep it open, I will put it in position, and then I'll click on that little three dots, and you see where it says pin for position. I make sure that's checked on. So that means it's going to stay right there from now on. When I go to another version of, when I open up another version of Photoshop on another computer, I can go to Window and Workspace and find this layout and use it for that. So this is what I like. I can rearrange things again, resave it with the same name, and keep updating that workspace and forever. And I can go to another computer and still have it. I can go to other programs within the Adobe family and do the same thing with the workspaces over there. All right, so that's the layout of the program. That's pretty much all we went over in the in-person class. So I wanted to make this video to make sure that I'm covering all that sort of thing for everybody. So yeah, that's it. There's nothing else to talk about, nothing else to go over right now. So I thank y'all for being here for this class. I'm going to stop this sharing real quick. Thank you for being here for this. This and the intro video will be up soon. So you'll have that, and I'm waiting to see y'all for lecture 2, and we'll go from there. All right. Have a good day.